Research methods in wargaming. Planning your feat. Research questions and a thesis. The last 2 weeks you selected a topic in Homeland Security. Completed a literature review of the topic. This week we take it a few steps further. You're going to establish a research question and establish a thesis. Now, this might sound relatively simple, and for some of you it will be, but there are certain criteria that each have to meet. Establishing a research question is an important step in conducting advanced research. We started out with a topic that's rather broad, and you go ahead and you research it through a lit review that's a little bit narrower. And literature reviews are the bane of all academics and advanced writers because they take a lot of time. Literature reviews are probably the biggest piece of most of the writing you're going to do. Essentially, as I said last week, you're going to educate your hypothesis in your research question. You're going to prove to the people that read it that you know what you're talking about. So next, when we turn to research questions, you have to ask yourself, what's the purpose of your work? Especially, I know professionally, there have been situations where I do a ton of research, and then I literally have to take 3 or 4 days off and say, okay, why am I doing this to get refocused? So, what's the purpose of your work? Why are we doing all of this? It can turn into getting lost in the woods, going off on a tangent. And of course, that's not anything anyone wants to do. You want to stay on the mark, and you don't want to wind up looking at something that's largely irrelevant. That's why we have a research question. It takes you and keeps you more focused. After establishing a robust and good research question, you have to answer it. This takes us to the next higher point, which is answering it with a thesis. And that is the point of the paper, essentially. That's your thesis with part of your research question is going to be your abstract. That's what, if you ever write academically, that's what people will be searching for. A lot of times in databases in the government, your thesis is the part that's searchable. Okay. While your topic and your literature review is somewhat broad, your research question and your thesis are specific. You're narrowing things down. My first attempt at a research question for my dissertation, my program director looked at me and essentially asked me at what age did I want to go ahead and finish my dissertation. Being a ripe old 35, she informed me that I would probably be in my early 60s because I wanted to take a look at democratization in 3 different areas of the former Soviet republics, the Caucasus regions, the Baltics, and what we would call Old Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. And she informed me, of course, that I was probably looking at a 600-page dissertation. Of course, I junked that idea and moved on to something else. Because, so your thesis statement, after you establish a good question, can go in a variety of different ways. First, let's talk about research questions. First, it has to be of some interest to researchers and others. It's a question that has to be researchable. I've had students in the past who wanted to research FISA warrants. Well, guess what? Most of us don't have the clearance to look at FISA warrants. It has to be measurable and testable, and they can't be too broad or too narrow. The latter of the two tend to be a little bit more, I hesitate to say, common sense. The biggest one, though, is number 2. Make sure it's researchable. Don't pick something out that, only the National Security Council has access to. Is it interesting? This can be personally, this can be popularly. Is it in vogue or a hot topic? Cyber warfare, immigration, border security, that's fine. Is it something the scholar feels neglected? That's another large checkbox on whether something is interesting. Is it researchable? Again, I say you already have a wealth of research completed. You might need a little more to answer your question. Can you find it and is it accessible? Don't be searching, trying to, who killed Kennedy? That's no. You don't want to deal with something like that. Is it answerable? Is there data? Can it be answered? Can a related thesis be tested? If you can't test your research question, you don't want to use that research question. Is the question too broad or too narrow? If it's too narrow, it might not have adequate data. If it's a broad topic, like my first dissertation suggestion, it might have too much. This could hamper developing an applicable thesis or testing of a theory. The research questions section that you're going to be writing, and listen up, the research questions section should include the following: the question itself, some background behind the question, an explanation as to your choice, and the possible benefit of the question to the study of your broader topic that you selected week one. A few side notes, you always have to cite your sources. So even though you cited them in your lit review, you have to cite them again. Make sure you do not write in the first person. Theses tend to be easier to develop, although there are some major pitfalls to avoid. Overgeneralizations. Don't make things too broad. Don't allege that hiring at Customs and Border Patrol is corrupt and impossible and wrong and unfair. Because generally it's not. I had that suggestion. Unrepresented in your thesis, make sure your research is reflected in your thesis. Don't research one thing in your lit review and then go off on a tangent. That's where that Woods picture came from. And don't make your thesis stating a fact. I had one person state that, Hitler ruined Germany. Well, yeah, no kidding. We know that. There has to be something that's a debatable point. And don't state a personal opinion. Remember, I, we, us, etc. are off limits now. If you want to state a part of a debate that you believe in, that's fine. But again, remember, do not write in the first person. And second of all, don't dumb it down. The easier a thesis is, generally, the easier it is to poke holes in. So, you don't want to get too complicated, but don't make it so easy as to, sit there and make it, academically simple to poke holes in it. Your thesis is an essay that answers your research question using the information in your lit review. Again, there is some literature review to add a related source or two, but you're working with what you have in your lit review. You should not spend a ton of time pouring through books, etc. over the next few weeks. Remember, these are going to be the focus of your Homeland Security issue analysis due in the last week, which is week 8. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to contact me.